a family isolated on a remote island, and an injured woman who washes up on shore. What could possibly go wrong? Pretty much everything. Hi, I'm Amanda, and this is Spineless Books, your one-stop shop for all things audiobook. Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy was released in March of 2025. It's all over the place. Every bookstore I have walked into in the last several months has it front and center. A colleague was reading it and knows that I read a ton and recommended that I pick it up even though she wasn't quite finished with it. So I put it on hold and actually got a copy fairly quickly from the library. It follows Dominic Salt and his 3 children who are living on a tiny island off the coast of Antarctica. I mean, when I say remote, it's really remote. Now, the island has been used as a seed library, sort of like the one that actually exists in Svalbard, which I didn't really know about before reading this book. The problem is that the water level is rising on this island, and it has no longer become sustainable as a place for the seed library. So this location that was once populated with scientists and researchers and conservationists from all over the world is suddenly just this man and his family. And their time there is coming to an end as well. They're wrapping up their time as caretakers, and soon they will have to return to the mainland. Now, Dominic went to the island shortly after the loss of his wife. And his 3 children have varying degrees of trepidation about returning to the mainland. Raph, who's 18, remembers things pretty vividly. Fen, who's 17, also remembers things pretty vividly. But Orly, who's only 9, really doesn't remember life other than on the island. So big changes are coming up for the Salt family. Dominic has definitely brought his children to this island for a reason. He's running from his problems, and as a way of keeping them safe and protected, he has chosen to essentially completely isolate them. So you can imagine that things get fairly hectic fairly quickly when Rowan, an injured woman, literally washes up on their shores. Dominic and his children do not trust this woman, but they do right by her and they take care of her and nurse her back to health. Now, you can imagine how she feels when she recovers and realizes that she is stuck on this island with them for at least 6 more weeks because they can't radio for help. All of their communication systems are down. So Dominic, Rowan, and the 3 kids have to figure out how to coexist with each other. They are stuck together for at least several more weeks. The book itself is split into character perspectives, so every chapter is told by a different character in the story. Now, they're not equally weighted, we don't get every character in equal parts, but we do, in the audiobook, get a new narrator for every character, and that definitely helps with clarity as you're listening. Overall, I think the narration was great. I had one tiny beef with it, and it was tiny, but I figured I'd note it. Steve West narrates Dominic's voice, and he has such a deep, gravelly voice with this character that when he speaks a woman's perspective or words, which is not frequent, but it does happen, it actually sounds a little silly, because he's just so baritone. The other narrators were Catherine Lytrell, Cooper Mortlock as 9-year-old Orly, and Saskia Marleveld, rounding out a really strong cast. In the time that Rowan is trapped with the Salt family, she has to forge relationships of varying kinds with all 4 of them. Orly is definitely the most receptive to her at 9 years old, and he bonds with her fairly quickly. The rest of them are a little bit more suspicious, with Dominic being the most suspicious. But Rowan is suspicious right back at Dominic, so things are definitely tense between them, and this novel is filled with tension. Fen and Raph are facing their own demons, so they're not as concerned with Rowan as Orly and Dominic are, but they do definitely interact with her and have their own dynamics. To complicate things, Dominic, Finn, and Raph are all grappling with what it means to actually return to mainland society. Orly doesn't remember life before the island, so he's kind of whatever about it. But the others do remember, and they have been away from the mainland for at least 8 full years, so this is dramatic and really intense for them. A fifth character who emerges slowly is Dominic's late wife, who he chooses to converse with on the regular. He often runs situations by her, and he feels like he gets responses from her. Now, McConaghy does not tip you as a reader one way or another as to whether this is supernatural or just something that a grieving man is imagining, so you can kind of make that call for yourself as a reader, which I thought was really cool. Dominic and Rowan are both morally gray characters, which makes this book super interesting. Everybody's done a little bit right and everybody's done a little bit wrong, and it leads to a really intense climax. But actually, what I really liked about this book more than anything was that the climax, to me, was not the most climactic part. I actually found the aftermath of the climax way more interesting. It was a really intense build-up, but the way the characters responded to the climax was much more engaging to me, and something that I don't think authors always do. Often that climax happens, and it peaks, and it ends, and then you just kind of like slowly unravel to the ending. But this actually got more interesting once the big event had happened. And I really found that characters were extremely informed by their pasts as far as how they responded. And I loved thinking about this as less blame and fault and more motivation and reaction to things. It got really interesting to me once the big things had happened. Each character has baggage, and that baggage affects the decisions they make, and it also kind of gives them a personal reckoning once we hit the climax. And I really found that portion of the book extremely interesting and well done. I don't want to spoil anything about what happens, but I will simply say that there were moments in this book where I was pretty confident I had figured out a twist, and I was not right. I mean, I might have gotten a small portion of it here or there, but when I thought I knew the twist, it twisted further, and it was extremely well planned, and McConaghy is pretty masterful in coming up with a very dense and complicated plot. It was layered, and it was really, really engaging. I gave this book a 4.5. Now, Goodreads doesn't let you do 0.5, so I put a 4 on Goodreads because I don't like to oversell my ratings, but it was a really, really good book. I think it's on the top of the charts for a reason, and I think this one is going to come out of 2025 with a host of awards. There's tons to talk about with this book, and it's just dark. I mean, this book could have easily been called Wild Shore, and it would have been appropriate, but Wild Dark Shore is just so much more fitting, because this book was really, really dark. So just know that before you head into it. It's not going to be an uplifting story, but I do think it's an extremely worthwhile read, and I will pick up more by Charlotte McConaghy in the future for sure. But remember, you might love what I hate and hate what I love, so make your own opinion. But thanks for listening to mine. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. It helps the channel a ton, and I appreciate all of your likes and comments, and hope to see you in the next one.